In our first video, we explained in detail the trisquared test and how it is used, its origins, the fundamental parameters and procedures that make up the operational methodology of the trisquared test, and how it is applicable in current research designs. We talked about the trisquared test terminology, things such as its foundational conceptual framework, which would be the mathematical law of trichotomy, and we explained with some sample data how to use the test. We showed the various tables that would be used that would provide the trisquared effect size, the trisquared alpha level for a particular test, and how sample sizes and different interval levels would be used to obtain the critical value needed for the statistical test of significance once the trisquared data has been qualitatively tabulated, quantitatively assessed through various calculations, and the final trisquared test calculation for the critical value versus that calculated value versus the critical value would be able to determine whether or not you are able to reject the null hypothesis. So we return to our question in which we ended in the last video. Can trisquared be used with other data? The answer to that overwhelmingly is yes. The operational parameters of the trisquared test allow it to be used with a variety of data and research experiments. Once the researcher reduces the data and or results into statistical trichotomous categorical and outcome variables, which we covered in detail in the last video. Once this is done, the researcher is thereby following the mathematical law of trichotomy and the trisquared research design methodology. And by doing this, one is able to take that data. So most of our data, we know that many persons are familiar with dichotomy, yes or no. There's actual trichotomy that exists in much of nature. And when you're able to reduce and tabulate your data down into those various components, it is very, very, very easy to use the trisquared test. Now, much of the trisquared test in and of itself is often used, and then when it's used to look at other research data, that is referred to as post hoc testing or post hoc test analysis. Therefore, we can ask the question, what are post hoc tests? In statistics and research, post hoc or post hoc tests, from the Latin terminology post hoc, which literally means after this, consists of carefully examining the results of a research experiment after it has concluded. In terms of the trisquared test, post hoc trisquared analysis has a single condition. There must be a statistical level of significance that was determined previously. In other words, a successful trisquared experiment was conducted in which you were able to reject the null hypothesis. Once this has been successfully done, you can then conduct a post hoc analysis because you have a level of significance, statistical significance, that you've already determined. Now, we just mentioned, and it's important to note, that the trisquared test in and of itself is often used as a form of post hoc analysis on other research designs, and we gave an example. One would be if you would actually do a correlation study and you would get a t-test, a student t-test for independent means of sample sizes of equal groups. And you determine that there was a level of significance and you noticed a trichotomy there and some of the results. If you're able to take those results and able to factor and tabulate that trichotomy, you're able to then determine, you can even develop your own instrument for that, your trisquared inventive investigative instrument, which we talked about in detail in the previous video, and tabulate those results from your own observational analysis or from the existing data if the trichotomy is already there into the 3x3 table, and therefore determine with a level of significance based upon your sample size if it's within the data, looking at the data results or tabulated from previous data from that actual sample derived from that population. You may then use a trisquared test as a means of post hoc test analysis, looking at variables that are trichotomous within the data, and that will give you some very powerful information about the actual research design and what you were actually doing. But in terms of the trisquared test in and of itself as the initial means of research, once that level of statistical significance has been established, you can then do after the fact or after this post hoc test analysis. So then what are trisquared post hoc tests? Currently, there are approximately 10 post hoc trisquared test statistical measures in existence. Perhaps more may appear in the future, but right now we have 10. These are collectively referred to as trio statistics because of the term trichotomy. So that trio, similar to biostatistics, we have trio statistics. And again, trio statistics refer directly to post hoc trisquared test statistical measures. The 10 post hoc trisquared statistical measures as they exist now are as follows. Number 1, trisymmetrical omnibus test. Number 2, the trimetric trisquared test. Number 3, trisquared mean cross-comparative analysis. Number 4, trivariant analysis. Number 5, trinova. Number 6, tricova. Number 7, multicova. Number 8, trichotomous progression analysis. Number 9, tricom. And number 10, tri-center analysis. So depending on your actual research design, you may be able to use one of these tests, and you may then utilize the test once you have that initial level of significance to look at the various parts of the trisquared test methodology. Now, these tests are designed in particular to study the creation of the trichotomous values that are used, the actual instrumentation from the inventive investigative instrument that you're using, trisquared mean analysis within the group means within the actual 3x3 table, looking at within and between group means to determine what was actually going on in the differences, looking at outcomes, looking at association measures, particularly in the omnibus test, to determine the level of association, similar to correlation, the strength of relationships between trichotomous, categorical, and outcome variables. So these are various tests which give you a lot of power. Forthcoming papers have already been published on the first 3, and there are further ones coming on the last 7. So when we begin to look at post hoc trisquared statistical measures, then we have 10 different ways of analyzing data to determine what was really going on in the research design. And these trial statistical measures provide you a great deal of information about your own research designs and what was really going on within the research investigation. And these clearly give more strength to the trisquared test from a post hoc perspective. Thank you for watching. And this concludes our information on the trisquared statistical measure and post hoc trisquared test statistical measures, also known as trio statistics.